Welcome into the Landon Tangwall Show. Ole Miss versus Miami in the college football playoff semifinal. We're about to give you an in-depth preview of every single position matchup in this game. I'm a former Penn State offensive lineman, so we're also going to get deep into the trenches. But I've been watching a ton of all 22 tape on both of these teams on both sides of the ball. So get your pencil and your paper out because this is going to be the most in-depth preview of Miami versus Ole Miss that you will find on the internet. I promise you that. We're going to have a lot more college football playoff content coming at you guys. We're going to have film breakdowns too. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. It is all free. No paywalls here. It is no paywall, just Tangwall. We just want you to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date. All right. Let's do a quick update on Ole Miss's staff because I think some people don't really know what's going on there with Lane Kiffin. He is taking 6 members of this offensive staff with him to LSU. So at the time of this recording, the only staff member that Lane Kiffin he's taking with him that is 100% going to coach in this game for Ole Miss against Miami is offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss Jr. Now, there are 5 other coaches that are probably not going to be back. So running back coach Kevin Smith already said he will not return. And then tight end coach Joe Cox, wide receiver coach George McDonald, quarterback analyst Dan Stevens, and then wide receiver GA Sawyer Jordan. They are all in flux. All 5 of those guys probably will not be back. That is kind of what has been reported up to this point. And Ole Miss head coach Pete Golding, he was asked about it. He said, look, we're going to go out there. We're going to spot the ball. We have plenty of enough people that showed up this morning. So makes for a great storyline and definitely some adversity for Ole Miss. One note, just to make sure everything's cleared up here, no defensive coaches are affected by this, so they are all full strength on the defensive staff. All right. Let's start this thing out. Ole Miss offense versus Miami defense. You guys know the drill, and we're going to start in the passing game. So Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss just coming off of probably his best game this entire year, 362 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was making good plays in the first half. Like, it was good. It was very good. He was on top of it. It was quick passes. That's kind of what their offense is. We'll get into that. But the second half is where he just turned it on. And he went into superstar playmaker mode where it was just a couple plays that were just jaw-dropping in how he bought himself time and found himself an outlet. And he's got some good weapons too. So Ole Miss wide receiver Harrison Wallace made a flurry of plays for Chambliss too. Harrison, actually a really good friend of mine. We came in together at Penn State. He was in my class and then obviously transferred to Ole Miss. Not exactly a speedster, a little bit of a bigger body, good route runner. He'll go up, track the ball. Those 50-50 balls, you're going to see those thrown his way. And then the other name you will hear at wide receiver, very similar guy, is Dejan Stribling, another bigger body, 6'2", good route runner. Him and Harrison Wallace are pretty similar in that sense. But let's talk about what this passing offense really looks like. So at its core, it is a very quick passing game. And they're very good at it. You're going to see a healthy amount of wide receiver screens. And the other piece of this, too, is if Chambliss, if he sees off coverage on the outside, meaning that those outside cornerbacks are 5, 6, 7 yards off of the line of scrimmage, he's going to turn and he will take that quick hitch or that quick out. He will throw that consistently. Sometimes it's an RPO, a run pass option, where he's looking out there and he decides to pull it and throw it out to the side. And then sometimes those hitches and quick outs are just kind of his first read in the passing game. So that's what you can expect there. But everything about this passing game is very, very quick. And now this is kind of a change up for the Miami defensive backs to what they've been used to, because the first 2 quarterbacks that they saw in these playoff games, they held onto the ball, honestly, for a while. So here are the following times of how long each quarterback that Miami's defense has faced has held on to the football. So Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed, he had an average time to throw of 2.98 seconds. That is incredibly long. And then Ohio State quarterback Julian Sain, his average time to throw was 2.91 seconds, still really, really long. So Chambliss, it's a little bit different. His average time to throw is 2.59 seconds. So close to a full half a second quicker than those other guys. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot naturally, but it's an average over time. So it just kind of gives you a read of, hey, this guy definitely does get the ball out really quick. Now, I will note, although Julian Sain does hold onto the ball fairly long for the average quarterback, he was really liable to throw those quick hitches and those quick outs in the RPO game, the same ones I was just talking about that Chambliss really likes to throw. Well, Miami, their DBs, their outside cornerbacks, they shut that down against Ohio State. Like, those cornerbacks, they gave no free access. They were pressed up on those Ohio State wide receivers, and they took it to him. So with how quick Chambliss really likes to get rid of that ball, I'm going to be curious to see if we get kind of that same formula from these Miami DBs where they're pressed up and they're not giving a lot of space to these Ole Miss wide receivers. And honestly, that's kind of what I would expect. I don't expect them to do anything different because it is a similar vibe to the offense. Now, speaking of these Miami defensive backs, they locked down what was widely considered to be the best wide receiver core in all of college football. So they said put some respect on their name, and they showed up in that one because they were hearing the chirping that the OSU wide receivers were about to do this and that to them, and it was shut down for the most part. Outside that one long ball to Jeremiah Smith, and they ended up getting turnover right after that, it was clamped down. Miami, nickel cornerback, Keontae Scott, might just be the best nickel in all of college football. This guy had the huge pick six versus Ohio State last week. His instincts, man, he is on top of it. He has really good movement in and out of his breaks, and you saw that on the pick six. So you got to be careful throwing the football around him. And then the other cornerback, OJ Frederick, he was playing fantastic last week until he went down and he was carted off of the field in the third quarter. He was seen in a boot and crutches, and Mario Cristobal said that he is day-to-day. My guess would be if you're in a boot and crutches, you're probably not going to play, about 7 days later, but we'll continue to monitor that. And then another cornerback for Miami, Damari Brown. He missed the first and second round of the college football playoffs with an undisclosed injury. And Mario Cristobal also said he is day-to-day. Now, for what it is worth, Mario Cristobal, every single time he was asked about an injury this week, every single answer was day-to-day. So I don't really know if we're getting that much out of that, but that is what he said. So no matter what, it seems like Miami is probably going to be a little bit depleted at the cornerback position. All right, let's talk about him. Listen, the nastiest defensive line in all of college football, Miami's front seven. Here are their two stats from their two college football playoff games that they've played in so far. 12 sacks, 50 pressures, 50. Talk about just creating just a bad life for the opposing quarterback, and 16 tackles for loss. They are as real as it gets. So Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor are the best pass rushing duo at defensive end that there is in college football. They both have incredibly quick get-offs, and that can make it really hard for an offensive tackle because they have to get the heck out of their stance. It's not, the guy's not right in front of me. They are just straight line speed off of that thing. They both have really good bend and have really, really good hands. They are always working their moves throughout the rush. Even if they get beat on a first move, they have counter moves, and that's what makes them so good. They always have an answer to the problem that's presented to them. And really, the biggest, and especially as a former offensive lineman, what is a lethal combo for a defensive end is a guy that has elite twitch off of the ball and just that get off, and then gets into really good power moves. So both of these guys they can do finesse, they can swipe those hands down, but they're both going to get into power moves. Ruben Bain a little bit even more than Akeem Mesidor, but they're both going to get into bull rushes and long arms, and they're going to try to completely just compress the pocket. And I kind of expect them to go with a similar game plan to what we saw when they went against Texas A&M in round one. And that was kind of more of a collapse the pocket instead of running the arc around the offensive tackle. And it was more just, hey, we're just going to completely collapse this thing in. And the reason why they did that against A&M was because Marcel Reed, their quarterback, was really good when he got outside of the pocket. He had speed, he could create, and he was able to just kind of take off and run. And that's kind of similar with Trinidad Chambliss, is that he can really hurt you when he gets outside of the pocket and starts scrambling and creating time and allowing his wide receivers to kind of start to run free. So that is something I'd be mindful of, and it kind of almost call them contain rushes to a degree. I think we'll see some of that. Now, the other tough part about these two defensive ends is their alignment. So they will line up in these wide 9 techs where there's so much space for the offensive tackles to have to cover. So you make them move. Now, you'll also see this Miami defensive line, they're going to put the guards in tough positions too. They are going to put these defensive ends, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, they will both pop inside and play 4 technique, the 4-eye, which is kind of like right inside the tackle. And they want to go up against the guards. So Ruben Bain had a really nice sack against Ohio State left guard Luke Montgomery that way. And the idea is, hey, like we're already going to give your offensive tackles trouble, but we want to create even bigger mismatch and put our athletic defensive ends against your guards, who guards are obviously generally a little less athletic than the offensive tackles. So you'll see that, especially on third down, so be on the lookout for that. Now, these Ole Miss offensive line, they did a pretty good job against this Georgia front seven last week, and this is a Georgia front seven that was giving it to a lot of people, that is for sure. They didn't allow a single sack against that Georgia front seven. I thought that was really impressive. The only problem is, and I said this last week, I gave Ohio State's offensive line some props, and I said the problem is they're going against the best defensive line in America. And a defensive line, I don't know the last time I've seen a defensive line this good just through and through. Now, if I had to pick a weak link in pass pro on this Ole Miss offensive line, it would probably be right guard Patrick Kutas, especially where kind of the rest, him and the rest of the Ole Miss offensive line, where I saw some struggles was picking up stunts and twists. When you start to loop guys around and there's a penetrator here and someone is looping the other way, you're going to see that from this Miami defensive line. I can promise you that, and that's another reason why it's so hard with their alignment when they get in these wide nines and they're in these 4-eyes where these guards and tackles, they just have to get out of their stance, and it's instantly like, oh crap mode, like I got to move. And then from that, they start running these twists and stunts, and you got to have good movement and have a good base as an offensive lineman. That's where it starts to get really difficult. So, I mean, this defensive line, they put you in a pickle, not only from their just ability and how good they are, but their alignment and how they set you up. That's how they get to you as well. Now, a note here. Ole Miss left tackle Diego Pounds has yet to allow a sack through 14 games this year. Now, we did this last week. I was talking all week. I had a tweet that went viral about it. I think that was part of the reason a lot of people knew. Sonny Styles, Ohio State's linebacker, he had yet to miss a tackle. He had no missed tackles. He had like 88 tackles, and none of them were missed on the entire season. And then in the first quarter, Miami running back Mark Fletcher ran through his face, and it kind of went viral. It was like, well, not anymore. So we will see if Diego Pounds can keep that streak going. I probably wouldn't bet on it. It's going to be tough for him, but we'll see. It's definitely going to be a battle out there. Now, let's talk about some other Miami defensive line. It's not just these two guys. Someone I want to talk about that's a little bit more of a depth piece here that really popped off on tape against Ohio State was Marquise Lightfoot, who's kind of a hybrid defensive end outside linebacker. Has some really nice pass rush moves, very fluid. He registered 3 pressures and a sack. He was just on 10 pass rush snaps. So he only rushed 10 times. You're getting 3 pressures and a sack on that. That is pretty good production. Now, he is going to spell Mesidor and Bain at times. But something that's interesting is that Miami, they don't really rotate their defensive line very much. So Ohio State, they ran 59 offensive plays. And Ohio State, they have a very slow tempo of offense. So I think Ole Miss will definitely be a little bit faster. But they had 59 plays on offense. And you had Bain played 55 of those snaps, and Mesidor played 51 of those snaps. So you're not seeing a ton of rotation for this Miami defensive line. If you continue to get that, if I'm Ole Miss, especially in the fourth quarter, you got to go hurry up because you have to find a way to not let these guys catch their breath. You got to find different ways to neutralize them. That would be a way to do it, at least a little bit, is go hurry up and just kind of make it too quick for them to the point where you're snapping the football and they aren't able to use that quick get off. So that's something I would be on the lookout for. You also have to deal with the interior of this defensive line, and you got some beasts there. So Ahmad Moten, David Blay, Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, all big-time guys in the middle. It is amazing how much depth they have created there. Now, there is an injury note right here is Ahmad Moten. He was injured in the third quarter versus Ohio State. Kind of seemed like an ankle injury. And, of course, as we said earlier, Cristobal said he is day-to-day. He very well might be. We don't know, but it's really no way to tell who's actually going to play and who isn't just because everything is day-to-day to Cristobal. And look, that's smart. He should do that. Keep Ole Miss on their toes. Don't let them know who's going to play in this game. But that's definitely one to keep an eye on because Moten is really, really good in the middle. And really, every single one of these defensive tackles can rush the passer, Moton being the best one out of all of them. But they're all legit in the middle. They all have really good hands. It's kind of the same thing with Mesidor and Bain, where they're always working those hands. And look, Jason Taylor deserves a ton of credit for this defensive line. But defensive tackle coach Damian Lewis, he needs to be up for a damn award for what he's done with this defensive tackle group. Because, like I said, the way they're playing, the depth that they have created, you see, Ahmad Moton go out, and it's just like they don't really skip a beat. They are just on top of it. So, how do you stop this defensive line? Well, I think the biggest thing is you do something similar that you did versus Georgia if you're Ole Miss. And they really got Chambliss out of the pocket a lot. There was a lot of movement. There was a lot of naked boots, sprint out protection, just moving him around so he's not a sitting duck in the pocket. And that's something that I would expect them to continue to try to do, especially against this Miami defensive line, because you have to try to find a way to neutralize them. So I think you see a healthy mix of that sprint out, move the pocket type protection. And then, like I said, hurry up is another tool in your tool belt that you have to try to utilize to slow down this defensive line's pass rush just a little bit. All right. Now, let's talk Ole Miss run game versus Miami's front seven. And yes, that was just the passing game. I told you we were going to be in depth, man. Hit that subscribe button, guys. I'll tell you what, we're going to keep going all season long. We're going to cover the heck out of these college football playoffs. All right. Ole Miss running back Kewan Lacey is about as elusive as a running back can get. He has forced 88 missed tackles on the season. That is second most in the FBS, only behind Ahmad Hardy out at Mizzou. So I'll tell you, let's kind of go through this run game. What does Ole Miss do in the run game? It's two main things that you're going to see. So you're going to see duo, which is basically inside zone. You're running it right up the gut. And one big note on that is that Lacey is very liable to bounce it outside. And that's kind of the second option of duo. If everything's kind of clogged up in the middle, you're going to bounce it out. But I would say like Lacey is abnormal with the amount that he bounces it outside. So the nice part about that is Ruben Bain, Miami's defensive end, is about as good of an edge setter and edge holder as it gets in the run game. But you just have to be very cognizant of the fact that he might kind of press, and then boom, he is cutting that thing outside. And then the other piece of this run game, you're going to see a lot of gap scheme from Ole Miss. So that's where you pull offensive linemen. Sometimes it's power. That's generally just kind of one puller. And sometimes it's counter. And that's where you get the guard and the tackle. And they're pulling around. You're moving big bodies. So you'll see a lot of those two type of runs. Just up the middle that might bounce outside. And a lot of pulling of the offensive linemen. Now, the other aspect of this run game, that's kind of the third piece, is the quarterback run. So Trinidad Chambliss is going to have designed quarterback runs in this game. You best believe it. Sometimes it is quarterback counter where he'll catch the ball and kind of wait a second and those guys will pull and he will just follow them. And sometimes he'll have his running back as a lead blocker. And sometimes he'll just catch it. And especially if it's like third and short, he'll catch it and just dive right up the middle. And the reason why this is kind of harder to stop for a defense at times is because think about a normal running back run. The quarterback hands the ball off to the running back. So it is 11 defenders versus 9 blockers because the quarterback is out of the play and the running back is toting the ball. So now you add your quarterback in as the runner. Your running back can now be a lead blocker. Now you have 10 blockers versus 11 defenders. So it's kind of just a numbers game that it gives you, and you only really do it if you have a quarterback that can do it, and that is what you get out of Trinidad Chambliss. So something to be aware of, especially when you're in the red zone or it is third and short there. And then one other small wrinkle I noticed too is they will do some direct snaps to Kewan Lacey in short yardage situations especially. Saw that a couple times last week. I think because they put that on tape multiple times last week against Georgia, we might not see it, but if I'm this Miami defense, that's something you have to be prepared for. Now, this Miami rushing defense, they are legit. Of these 2 college football playoff games that they've played, they are averaging 67 yards allowed on the ground. That is really, really good. They have been stout, and it's for a reason. Mo Toure at linebacker flies around the field. He's really good at shooting those gaps. Seen that a lot on his tape. And then those linebackers, they're able to do kind of what they do. And that is because of the defensive tackles and the defensive line that I talked about earlier. They are just as good in the run game as they are in the pass rush game. And that's what makes it so hard to run on Miami, is they got these guys that can put two hands in, and it's hard to move them, and they're going to control you, and they're kind of going to watch where the running back's going and try to shed you to one side or the other. So that's what this Ole Miss offensive line is facing. And like I said, I give them a ton of credit. They handled a Georgia front seven that was definitely one of the best out there. And you know, they just got done handling Alabama, although that doesn't really mean much after what happened against Indiana. But it's different because you got to go against the best defensive line in America. That's where you're at now. So that kind of sums up that Ole Miss offense versus that Miami defense. So let's switch over. Let's go Miami offense versus this Ole Miss defense. So we'll start out with the passing offense versus the passing defense. Carson Beck shut up a lot of people that were saying it was going to be a really bad game for him. And look, he didn't light up the scoreboard as far as stats go. He was 19 of 26, 138 yards, and just a touchdown. But he managed the offense exactly how it needed to be managed. So I definitely want to give him credit for that. And look, we were talking about quick passing with Trinidad Chambliss and this Ole Miss offense. It is even faster with Carson Beck in this Miami offense. He has the quickest time to throw out of any Power 4 quarterback out there. 2.35 seconds is how quick he gets it out on average. And when you watch the tape, you see why. You're going to see a ton of wide receiver screens. You're going to see jet motions kind of into the flats where he just dumps it off, those quick hitches, those curls. And then you'll see a decent amount of running back passes out of the backfield. That's really how Miami kind of butters their bread. And that was something that he got to early on. He actually missed on two of them, but early on, one of them got batted down. But early on, he was trying to get the ball to Mark Fletcher in the passing game because Ohio State was kind of backing off of everybody. So he was trying to dump it off there. And then Carson Beck, he's going to take his deep shots. We will get to that in a second, but he'll find his shots here and there outside of just the really quick stuff. So very similarly to Chambliss, Beck loves to rip those hitches and those outside quick outs, all that type of stuff, the outside the numbers game. And that's something that Georgia really went after against this Ole Miss defense that I saw, because Ole Miss, their cornerbacks on the outside, they will play a decent amount of just kind of bail. Well, what that means is if you're square to the line of scrimmage as a cornerback, you kind of just start to turn and run like right at the snap. There's no like kind of wait. And sometimes they will, but it's a lot of off coverage and kind of bailing from those outside cornerbacks. So I expect if Beck sees that on the outside, he is going to turn and he will rip those out there because that's, like I said, that is what they like to do. And then the other piece, talking about some wide receiver screens a couple seconds ago, Miami wide receiver Malachi Toney, that's where he lives. He gets a couple of those screens at least per game. Sometimes you'll see him get upwards of like 3 to 4 to 5 screens in one game. And Georgia actually had a couple really big-time gains on those wide receiver screens because there was some bad tackling from those Ole Miss DBs. So I promise that'll probably get tested early on because Miami lives in the passing game. It's going to be quick screens. It's going to be quick hitches, all of that stuff. He'll throw some balls over the middle, but especially early on, I would expect Carson Beck to be getting that ball out quick as he usually does. And then also expect Miami wide receiver CJ Daniels. He is going to be heavily involved in this one, that is for sure. Has been kind of not down at all, but hasn't seen as many catches. I think he had 5 in the last one and then 2 before that. I would expect him to really get involved. Let's talk about these Ole Miss DBs for a second. Their best player in that secondary is Wyatt Williams at safety. He has elite anticipation. He has 9 pass breakups on this year. That's the most in all of college football. The next closest is 7 pass breakups. So try not to throw near Williams because he's probably going to bat that football down. Now, the weak link of this Ole Miss DB room is at safety, Kepna Gushikin. Sorry if I butchered that at all. Been practicing that one. Still didn't come out right. Georgia was going at him all day long. He had 2 DPIs and he let up a touchdown on the slot fade. Now, One of the outside cornerbacks, too, that I was looking at that I've seen kind of struggle at times was Jalen Braxton at cornerback. He can get a little bit handsy at times. And really, Braxton and Kepna, they both do that. They both have the most penalties. They're tied for the most penalties in that DB room for Ole Miss. So when Beck does take some shots, expect for it to be on Braxton or Kepna. But overall, that's what you're going to see. It's going to be quick stuff out of Miami. And then, like I said, you're going to see those shots from time to time. Carson Beck only took 2 of them against Ohio State. I would expect to see a little bit more of that, especially against these Ole Miss DBs, where he's going to take some of those slot fades, or it's just going to be a go ball, and he's just going to try to lay it up. All right, let's talk about this Miami offensive line in pass protection. Left tackle Markel Bell has not allowed a sack all season long. And then right tackle Francis Mauigoa has not allowed a sack since week 4. So listen, Mauigoa, he's going to be a first-round draft pick in April, has the cleanest movement I have seen in a long time for an offensive tackle. His pass set is it is pure. His hands are really precise. He's really good with his hand usage. And they're going to face off against some good defensive ends for Ole Miss. So you got Cam Franklin, Prince Will Omanlian, and then Suntarine Perkins. Those are all pretty good edges out there, and I think it's going to be a really good battle. I do lean towards this Miami offensive line having the edge because I've seen what they've done to really good edges. In A&M's pass rusher Cassius Howe was completely shut down, and then both of Ohio State's pass rushers, Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson, were both having really good years, and you didn't hear a peep out of them all night long. So I think I have to give them the advantage, and I think they're going to continue to keep Beck clean. Part of it is because he gets the ball out so quick, but also this protection is really, really good. Now, something to note, Miami is going to see a decent amount of drop 8 from this defense, meaning that Ole Miss is just going to rush 3 guys. You will see that, and generally when they do that, they're going to run some type of stunt out of that Ole Miss will. So one thing I will note when you start to see that, when you see a drop 8 and everything is kind of taken away for Beck, and there's not like a ton of answers and all the passing lanes are covered, don't be surprised to see him kind of just tuck it and run. So last week versus Ohio State, Beck actually had his most rushing attempts in a single game all season long. It was against Ohio State. He had 7 rush attempts. And there was a lot of times where it was kind of, he looked and it was like first read, second read not there, and just kind of took off. And his legs were actually a big part of that game. There was a really big third down towards the end that he converted. That was a huge momentum killer for Ohio State's defense that they did not get off the field there. So it's looking like Carson Beck, especially in the playoffs where it's do or die, he is willing to use his legs and get it done. Not exactly someone that's a speedster or super known to run the football out of the pocket, but definitely something to kind of keep an eye on if I'm this Ole Miss defense. Now, on the interior, Miami center James Brockermeyer is fantastic in pass pro. We will get back to him in run game, as I have an apology to issue to Mr. Brockermeyer. But he is going to face off him in kind of this interior offensive line for Miami that's been really, really solid. They're going to go against nose tackle Will Eccles and then defensive tackle Zaven Harris. So both of those guys are really good. Eccles, real deal in all phases of the game. Not someone I would want to go against as an offensive lineman. He is going to bring it. Now, like I said, Ohio State had some really good defensive tackles last week too, and it was a pretty good day for this Miami offensive line. Now, across the board, Miami offensive line, really good in pass pro, especially when they're in one-on-one situations. But the only place I've really found them to struggle, and it's not super often, but if there is a place that they struggle, it is sometimes that blitz and stunt pickup game. That's where they've gotten caught lacking just a couple times, really, against Texas A&M there. And that's something you can expect from this Ole Miss defense. If it is third and medium or longer, you are going to get one of two things. Probably 80-90% of the time, you're going to either get a stunt out of the 3 to 4 man rush, or you're going to get a blitz. They're going to do one of those two. So if it's third and medium or longer and 10 is up, if you're this Miami offensive line, you're going to get something coming at you, and you got to be ready. Set vertical, get ready for those twists, those stunts, and you got to communicate well and pass this thing off. And I do want to, say that this offensive line has been doing a fantastic job all season long. Alex Mirabal, their offensive line coach, actually recruited me back when he was at Oregon. has done a fantastic job with them. So one thing that I do want to note on these twists by this, when they're running these stunts and these twists on this Ole Miss defense here, the loopers that are looping around, they will kind of peel back a little bit if it looks like they're not going to get in on the rush and try to pop back into the passing lanes and bat the football down. And that's something that we saw a decent amount versus Georgia. Ole Miss, they actually had 4 batted down passes against Georgia. So Beck needs to be on the lookout for that. If he sees a looper that's dropping back into the passing lanes, you might got to work a sidearm or something, but you got to be ready because they are going to try to get their hands up and bat those footballs down. Now, last note on pass protection for Miami, Mark Fletcher Jr., it's about as good as it gets out there at running back and pass protection. It's really pretty how much he loves it. And a tip of the cap to running back coach Matt Merritt, always has him ready in the blocking game. And you can tell it's not just physicality, but he always keeps a base, really good fundamentals. So that's someone they can definitely count on in blitz pickup. All right, let's talk run game here. Speaking of Mark Fletcher Jr., he will run through your face. Just ask Ohio State linebacker Sonny Styles, because it happened to him. And really, this offensive line is super physical. I thought they were going against the best front seven in all of college football against Ohio State. I give that the D-line title goes to Miami, but front seven as a whole, I thought it was far and away Ohio State. And they took it to them. They had some dominant combo blocks up front where it was just moving defensive tackles 3, 4, 5 yards downfield, displacing them and giving Mark Fletcher some really nice holes to run through. Now, it is time to issue my apology to Miami center James Brockermeyer. I called him out last week. I said, look, Caden McDonald, if there's a reason that the Miami offensive line and the run game's going to struggle, it's because Caden McDonald's going to give him issues on the interior. And at times, Caden McDonald got him a couple times. That's probably a first-round draft pick, but I got to give credit to James Brockermeyer. Played one of his better run games of the year, and it was against, like I said, an elite defensive line, so he deserves a ton of credit for that one. But now, he gets rewarded with another really, really tough matchup. Like I said earlier, Eccles and Harris, nose tackle, defensive tackle, really good in the run game, super stout. It's hard to move these guys. They're going to play 2 hands in. They play into their guys, and you're going to try to have to hit that hip and knock them over and get them out of the way. But another piece of what Ole Miss does up front, and this kind of goes right hand in hand with the stunting and the looping that we talked about, is you're going to get that in the run game as well. You're going to see a ton of that. And that's when they really get into the backfield and start to create those TFLs. And that kind of caused some issues for Georgia in the run game against this Ole Miss defense, because they were constantly in the backfield when Georgia was trying to run. And now I will say that's something that Miami has shown that they're really good at, honestly, in the blitz pickup run game. So against Texas A&M, who's a super blitz-heavy team, that's kind of what they're known for down there. The offensive line for Miami did a really, really good job picking up blitzes and allowing Fletcher to get into some really big holes. And honestly, those were some of his best runs of the day against A&M. They were all against really blitzes that A&M brought, and Miami just picked them up really, really nicely. And so, listen, when you do run those stunts, there are times where it creates those big holes for the running back. It's what we call creasing the stunt. If you kind of pick up the blitzer and the guys that are stunting, you just kind of take them where they want to go, it creates a hole. And Georgia did that a couple times against this defensive line for Ole Miss. But generally, Georgia was getting beat by these stunts in the run game. And now, one thing that you will see from Miami is they will insert a wide receiver into the A-gap and pick up blocks in the run game. So they popped a really nice one against A&M by inserting a wide receiver, and he picked up a blitzing safety from depth, and they broke off a really, really nice run with Mark Fletcher Jr. So that's something to be on the lookout for. They're going to get these wide receivers involved in the blocking game. Honestly, for how dynamic and kind of just fast these Miami wide receivers are, they actually ask a lot out of them in the blocking game, and I think they deserve a ton of credit. Malachi Toney blocks his butt off. I mean, he gets in there and digs people out, and they're just asked to do a lot in this scheme, so I think they definitely deserve some credit for that. All right, real quick, I want to talk about a tendency that I did find in the Ole Miss defense. They love blitzing one of their linebackers into the A gap on first and second down. It's something that was pretty frequent throughout the games that I watch. We call that just plugging a linebacker. They're just going to plug a linebacker on early downs because they're first and second down. That's generally kind of running downs. I mean, you're going to do whatever you want to do, but you're expecting a run there, and they're just plug right in. So I'd be on the lookout for that. And Miami has to have their eyes up on the offensive line and see if that linebacker's starting to creep in. Get those eyes up, and someone is going to have to pick that up. So you're going to need good communication against this Ole Miss front seven because they're just going to go. Now, Ole Miss linebackers, Andrew Jones, number 44, pretty good linebacker, aggressive and gets downhill, and they'll rotate those linebackers a decent amount. Now, one guy that plays a lot is TJ Daugherty, number 6. Not a very good linebacker, if you want me to be honest. And I feel like he is a big part of the reason that this defense is allowing 146 rushing yards per game, which is a lot. You look at the other defenses in the college football playoffs, and they are all under 100 yards rushing, and Ole Miss is up at 146 yards rushing allowed per game by their defense. You guys know, I don't just say things just to say it, but this guy, it's almost like he wants to be blocked on film. He does not get off of blocks at all. I was shocked, honestly, that he is the starter and you can't kind of rotate someone else in because Georgia was taking it to him in the run game all day long. I'm not trying to bash him, but that was something that I wrote down 10 different times as I was watching tape. I was like, man, he has got to find a better way to get off these blocks and disengage with these offensive linemen. But outside of that, I think kind of that's where Miami's going to try to win this game. You look at a rushing defense for Ole Miss that really has struggled up to this point, and specifically in some of these bigger games, and has allowed guys to just get going. If I'm Miami, I'm saying, hey, let's get Mark Fletcher Jr. going early. And if they do that, I think it really becomes a long day for this Ole Miss defense. All right. That is everything, ladies and gentlemen. We will have a Oregon versus Indiana preview out later this week. That was a lot of prep work I did for this one. If you cannot tell, we went through every single thing of this matchup. I'm very excited about it, though. We will definitely have more content surrounding this one and definitely some post-game stuff as well. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.